Our next guest is Eugene Wamalwa. He is the party leader of the Democratic Action Party of Kenya, DAP-K. We call it DAP Kenya, DAP Kenya. What do you call it, Eugene?
I can call it DAP Kenya or DAP Kenya.
DAP Kenya is fine.
Yes.
We'll be calling it DAP
And if you want to be dapper, Eric joined the DAP Kenya party.
It's the DAP Kenya.
The youngest party in Kenya, the new kid on the block.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'll be telling us more about it as we have this conversation. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
It's good to have you in the situation
Thank
room.
you very much.
That is all we call the hot seat of the situation room. How does it feel? Does it feel comfortable?
Yes, I'm all right.
Very good. There's a tin in front of you there. It's a kiwi tin.
Yes.
Of course, you have used kiwi,
Yes.
right? All along. Now, there's something that kiwi is doing, especially now that we're talking about schools reopening. And people are trying to think, how do I take my children back to school fees? Maybe you're sponsoring a child and you're thinking, I need to raise money to send this child back to school. Kiwi is saying, we're also in that mix and we can help you. If you go and purchase kiwi, and this particular kiwi that has this starburst,
Yes.
the starburst is one that indicates this is the one that's participating in this promotion. Buy kiwi, open the lid.
Yes.
Under the lid, you will find a code. This one doesn't have a code itself. It's for demo purposes. So you find a code.
Yes.
And once you get that code, then you look at the starburst. You dial *459*5#. You input the code that you'll find there.
Yes.
And then you send it. When you send, first thing that you do is automatically you receive either airtime or data. And then the second thing that happens is that your number then enters into a draw.
Yes.
When it goes into a draw, every week, 4 winners are getting 35,000 shillings each. That goes towards school fees.
That's great.
For their children or children, you can just choose the child that wants to benefit from this.
Yes.
And the schools they're in, the money will go straight to the school. 35,000 shillings for 4 winners every week since last year around November, and it's still ongoing.
Thank you. I have an old one, so I think I need to get a new one. That might have a code.
Go buy the new one with a code, and I'm sure you can sponsor 1 or 2 children.
That would be great.
If they get.
That would be great.
Yeah. It's the way to go. Karibu sana.
Asante.
City usually has the day's proverb.
Yes.
Every week he goes into one African country and then he mines proverbs from that country. This week he has decided that we're going to Nigeria.
Yes.
Our colleague Ndu is not in.
Yes.
She would have read the proverb in Pidgin and then would have asked you to try and translate it to English. But now that she's not here, City will not do Pidgin.
Nope.
He'll only do English.
Yes. And Nigeria is a country rich in so many things. It's rich in people, around 231 million people. But the thing that I find interesting about it, among the many things that are interesting, is the sort of government they have. It's called a federal presidential constitutional republic. Let me repeat it.
A federal what?
Presidential constitutional republic. It's like the USA in terms
it's federal presidential.
Presidential, and then republic. Meaning, all those units that in our country would refer to as counties are actually, you call them semi-autonomous if you want, but they're fairly autonomous units. And the governors, they also have governors, very powerful.
Very powerful governors.
Yes. In fact, in that country, it is said, if the government don't like you, you cannot become president. Is that how powerful? So you can argue that that probably helps create a balance. And it gives people a much needed autonomy to actually determine the destinies of their own people. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. The proverb. One-legged man is seldom thankful to God until he sees a crippled person.
Say again.
A one-legged man is seldom thankful to God until he sees a crippled person.
Eugene, when you hear this proverb, what comes to mind? What's your interpretation of it?
I think as a Christian, there's a song that says, count your blessings, name them one by one. Then you realize how blessed you are. But sometimes when you have challenges in life, you tend to forget until you meet someone who is more challenged than you. I think it's a very realistic proverb. Yes.
Good. He's put it well. Simply, but very spot on. Yes.
Indeed. As we begin the conversation, please explain the ribbon.
Actually,
this
as you explain the ribbon, please don't forget to explain the tie and the color also. But
Yes.
go on, start with the ribbon.
Starting with the ribbon, the purple ribbon is a ribbon that's being worn by every lawyer in the Republic of Kenya. And it was a call made by the Law Society of Kenya, President Eric Leury. And being lawyers, we have responded by wearing purple ribbons as a form of protest against executive interference in the judiciary, executive threats against the judiciary, and intimidation against the judiciary. And we had our first march last Friday. We all converged at the Supreme Court, and we reaffirmed our oath of office as lawyers. When you admitted as lawyer, Eric, you take an oath to defend the Constitution, the rule of law, and the administration of justice in Kenya. And when we feel this is being threatened, as lawyers, it is our duty to come out to defend the Constitution, the rule of law. When one arm of government becomes so aggressive as to attack the other arm of government, and we have seen this in the Kenya Kwanza administration. They started, first of all, by aggressively courting Parliament, buying members of Parliament who were in our coalition, the Azimio coalition, to move to their side. Because when the results were announced, Azimio had more MPs. We had over 172, Kenya Kwanza had about 165. So they bought 12 MPs, I think, from UDM. They targeted Jubilee, 26 MPs. So by so doing, they were able to capture Parliament and create a tyranny of numbers in Parliament. Through that, they're able to now pass laws and policies that they wish to, enforce. And when that is now challenged in court, they are very, very unhappy. At first, they started also the art of seduction with the judiciary also. You do remember the first thing was like, what would you like? More funding? Yes, I'll give you more funding. What would you like? The judges who have not been appointed. On day one, I'll do that. Then when the cases started coming, challenging the housing levy and other retrogressive policies, that seduction turned into aggression. And we've seen the attacks on the judiciary. And this is why, as lawyers, we came together and we say, no, we must tell William Ruto and the Kenya Kwanza regime that they must respect the rule of law. If they have any issues with our courts or any evidence against any judicial officer of misconduct, the Constitution provides for channels for them to challenge that. So that is why you're seeing us with these purple ribbons, and we keep going on and on until William Ruto respects the Constitution. He swore to uphold. And that is the same Constitution as lawyers we swore to defend. So that is the meaning of this purple ribbon and my purple tie.
I get it.
Thank you.
It explains the tie as well.
No, that's a lovely tie. I'm not aware of ties, but
Yes.
I know a good thing when I see it.
Thank you very much.
Mheshimiwa, is there anything wrong with any arm of government speaking out against what it feels would be unfair treatment by another arm of government?
There isn't anything wrong with that. Or we're not saying our courts are infallible, because no human being is. And we in Azimio have criticized them before. You remember the hot air judgment. We were very unhappy with it, but eventually we accepted it as people who respect the rule of law. And just recently, there was also another ruling by the Supreme Court on the issue of homosexuality. Most of us as Christians, as Muslims, we disagreed with that ruling. And we are saying the Supreme Court can be wrong. But also, when it comes to the institution, if you have any issues with the institution or any officer, we're saying please follow the lay down procedure. You cannot just do carpet bombing of an entire institution to say that or these are corrupt people. No, there could be corrupt elements. So we're saying there's nothing wrong with a positive criticism of any institution. But when there is open aggression aimed at intimidating these institutions, then our democracy is challenged. Because we have a history as a country of our democratic institutions being bastardized, being eroded by dictatorial regimes. You remember during the Nyayo era, we had a very overbearing executive and very feeble legislative and judicial arms of government. And when we look at the current regime, right from William Ruto to all his colleagues, they were formerly, KANU, students of Moi. And during the Nyayo era, what happened could easily happen if we allow them wafuate Nyayo and they take us back there. So as lawyers, as leaders in Azimio, we have said we cannot allow our country to go back to those dictatorial days.
But then, just like you've mentioned, in those old days, there was the law that allowed the executive to play the game that it was playing.
Yes.
Right? For example, the president could appoint and fire judges.
Yes.
Now, the law does not allow the president to appoint and fire judges at will. If there was any transfer, the president could influence even the transfer of judges. Now, there is an independent commission that's in charge of managing affairs of the judiciary, and it's in law. Now, when one arm of government, let's say the executive now, goes to public rallies and churches and out there on rooftops and talks, it's only talk. Unless you're saying that there have been attempts at amending the law so that then the executive gets the powers that the previous executives had to undermine the judiciary.
Actually, if you do recall what happened in 2007, 2008, this country suffered a crisis of confidence in its institutions. Two key institutions that were in the eye of the storm were the judiciary and the electoral commission. And you remember when the results were announced, we said we have no faith in this judiciary, court bandia. We took to the streets. And you know what happened? Over 1,300 people lost their lives. Our economy almost collapsed. And we set this country on the path of reforms to, strengthen our institutions, to have in place a new constitution that will ensure the principle of separation of powers is respected. And that is how we have had a very successful run in the judicial reforms we've had. But when we start going back to those days of, bastardizing an institution, we erode public confidence in these institutions. You see, the judges, once they are robbed, they cannot, of course, they have their 4x4s also, but they cannot take to the rooftops and answer what was said, say in Nakuru, what was said in Nyahururu the other day, what was said in Eldoret. They cannot do that. They are not in a position to come to the public and defend themselves or answer what the Kenya Kwanza people are saying. They speak through their rulings, they speak through their judgments, and we're saying it is unfair for the Kenya Kwanza regime to go on an all-out frontal assault on the judiciary. Those villagers you're talking to start losing confidence in their courts, in their judges. They start looking at this as, court bandia, as we call them, these corrupt people. And it is all about that confidence. And we're not just talking about the locals also. Foreigners who come to invest in this country. It scares away foreigners when we have a country that does not respect the rule of law. The matter is quite serious, Eric, and we're saying the Kenya Kwanza regime is out of order. If they have issues with specific judicial officers, and I've heard the deputy president will be presenting a petition, this is what they should be doing. Let them follow the laid down procedures by our constitution, by our laws. And I only urge him, Bwana Gachagua, as you go to court on Thursday to present your petition, please tell your boss to follow suit. Let them stop these roadside attacks on the judiciary and present their petitions. And I can tell you there are officers, judicial officers, who have gone through that process. I was the last Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs. And I remember when I was taking over office in 2012, the tribunal was formed against the former Deputy Chief Justice, Nancy Baraza, who was very close to me.
Yeah.
But by the time I entered office, a tribunal had already been formed by President Kibaki, and it was headed by the former Tanzania Chief Justice. And they looked at the evidence. They found there had been misconduct. Though many of us felt the threshold was too low. She was said to have pinched some lady's nose, and she was removed as Deputy Chief Justice and Vice President of the Supreme Court. So we are saying our laws work, our constitution works, and we are all bound by that constitution, including the president. Let them follow it.
You know, as you say this, Mheshimiwa,
Yes.
do we take into consideration that these individuals who are making these pronouncements actually know the rule of law, know what they should do, but choose not to? And if my supposition is correct, then the question is, why do they take this path?
It is impunity. This is one thing that the Kenya Kwanza government has owned. Apart from telling lies here and there is total impunity, because by the deputy president saying he's going to go to court to put his petition, it means they know what our constitution provides. They know what they should do, but they're deliberately intimidating the judiciary. It is a deliberate, aggressive move to intimidate, because at first when they came in, they were the ones singing about the rule of law. There's no speech they would make without saying the rule of law. But once they started, after capturing parliament, passing these policies, very oppressive policies on housing levy, forcing Kenyans to pay taxes and or on building houses, then once that is challenged, they get very aggressive against the judiciary. They start intimidating even litigants. Yet our law allows anyone in the public interest to go to court and defend that public interest. A fellow like Okiya Omtatah, he may not be a very likable guy, but our constitution says we must nilly-willy defend his right to go to court, to challenge any policy, to challenge any law, or to challenge anyone, including the president himself. So you cannot tell him you are a thug, you are a mkora, because you went to court to challenge my policies or the laws that have been passed. He has that constitutional right to do it. And we're just telling them to stop these bad manners of trying to intimidate everybody, because that is how dictatorships are created, when you say you don't want to be questioned on anything.
Well, if you think that is bad, I'm looking at page 9 of the Star.
Yes.
And there is an article here that refers to the Nandi Senator Samuel Cherargei, who is reported to have said, we will elect LSK leaders friendly to government. We will elect. He's a lawyer, I believe.
This is disaster.
Now, he proceeds to say, the current law society of Kenya is made up of people who are working with those opposed to the government. And that is why the coming elections, we have people who support the government agenda. Saying that is how. Now, when somebody speaks this plainly, you don't need some great prowess analysis. It's quite clear what he's saying.
That's correct. And it is this intolerance that we are fighting, because it is this intolerance that now creates a dictatorial regime. When someone feels he cannot be questioned and he must have his way, the minute you disagree with him, he says, now we must remove these judges and put, friendly judges. Now, for them to even think they can come to the law society and tell us lawyers who should be our president. And the same they would want to do at the Council of Governors. So this is how a dictatorship is created. It's our way or the highway. If you say no to us, we'll crush you. And we've had them even when the media, and we must thank you, the media guys, for being very, very resilient in spite of threats and intimidation. Because we had this same regime. They started by swearing they'll crush the media. then now they are aiming at, of course, they have already crushed parliament by capturing and creating an artificial majority. Now they're aiming at crushing any resistance in the judiciary. But as lawyers, we are telling them we will not allow that intimidation to come to the law society. Every lawyer in this country has sworn to defend this constitution and the rule of law and the administration of justice. And for this, we are prepared to go all out. And in all our 47 counties, we'll come out as lawyers next Friday and the following Friday until this dictatorship that is being created by Kenya Kwanza is stopped.
It's a good thing to see lawyers, coming out to defend their profession and also to defend the institution where they work, because the judiciary, that's it. You're officer of the court as an advocate. Then therefore, when the judiciary is attacked, basically they're attacking your profession. Now, that's one side. And then we see politicians. And I've got to ask you this question, Eugene. Is it only the Kenya Kwanza politicians who have attacked the judiciary? Or is it just impunity, as you called it, or bad manners of the political class in this country to go out in public and speak as they will about the judiciary while fully knowing the impact of what they're saying?
I think, to be fair, Eric, we can't say it's only Kenya Kwanza, because even on our side, we have overstepped sometimes, and it's just the bad manners of the political class. But what we are saying is that we every time anyone crosses that line, they must be called to order. And we want to call Kenya Kwanza to order, to tell them to stop this intimidation of the judiciary and these bad manners and this intolerance. If you are dissatisfied by any decision of the court, you appeal against that decision. And with the set system of misconduct, any judicial misconduct being addressed, we have seen, just in the recent past, a judge called Said Chitembwe, a very good friend of mine. I think it was Governor Sonko, former governor, some people who raised issues that there was some corrupt activities he was involved in. And they took him through the process. A tribunal was formed, evidence was tendered, and it was found that indeed there was sufficient evidence to kick him out. He was dissatisfied. He went to the Court of Appeal himself to challenge that decision. Just recently, the Court of Appeal upheld that decision, meaning our constitution works. If you have anything against any judge, please follow the laid-down procedure. But let's stop these bad manners, this intolerance we are seeing from the Kenya Kwanza side.
How can we rein in politicians from these bad manners? Because, Eugene, much as you're the one who's sitting here today, on the other side of the divide, when you're in the executive, those who are on the other side of the divide were sitting the same place, saying exactly the same thing about those who are in power, Eugene Wamalwa included.
That's why I'm saying...
so how can we make sure that when Eugene lives here, we are not going to have Kipchumba Murkomen next time sitting exactly where you're sitting, saying the kind of things that Kipchumba was saying in 2021 on this seat?
Can we give this thing a reference, Eric? If you recall, the immediate former president declined to swear in a certain number of judges of the Court of Appeal. And he gave his reasons. Now, there are those who postulated and said, well, these are people who will probably not sing the tune that he wants to. But more importantly, as soon as that government came into power, if you recall, they first targeted the media. It's like they woke up and said, we must make sure that we sit on these people properly so that they do not go around making these unnecessary noises they make.
Correct.
Now, this other government came in and the same thing. So this intolerance, even as we speak about it, now you are not known to make hawkish statements and say things that we can now quote with ease. But the class that you belong to by choice, the political class, are very similar when it comes to their levels of intolerance.
I want to agree with you guys. I don't want to be the Pharisee here with a holier-than-thou attitude. I must say, as a political class, we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory. And we're not just talking about Kenya Kwanza, because we're also guilty of some of these. But we are saying going forward, we must uphold the rule of law and we must respect our institutions. I think it's Barack Obama who said that what Africa needs is are not strong men, but strong institutions. Because when we have strong institutions in place, it doesn't matter which side of the divide you are. Justice William Tunga was reminding us the other day, like when we were in power, he was telling us, the exact things we're saying here. But when you're out of government and you have a vindictive government in place, a vengeful, the only thing that protects you is the law and those strong institutions. Because I can tell you today, even as the Deputy President Gachagua goes to to court to present his petition, you can see it is not that he is really following the law. It is some vendetta about a certain judge who presided over a matter involving him as a person, and who froze his 200 million found on some account somewhere. So it's not really about him. It's not really about the country. It's about him. This is vindictiveness. This is vengeance. And even the Bible tells us, vengeance is mine, that says the Lord. But when you have a vengeful government, the last line of defense for every Kenyan is that court. We cannot allow this institution to collapse, because in it we shall find refuge. Whether you're in government now or in the opposition tomorrow, we must be able to find equal protection of the law that we're entitled to. And that's why in our national anthem we say, may justice be our shield and defender. If we start seeing Kenya Kwanza destroying that shield, as Kenyans, we must be worried. Because then between us and tyranny, there will be no shield to defend us.
Okay. Mheshimiwa, we've got to talk about the National Dialogue Committee and the work that the National Dialogue Committee did. There was a lot of talk prior to this on the need for dialogue as a country, bringing bipartisan people into one particular table, have a conversation, and see chart a path forward for prosperity of the country. At the end, there was a report that came out. Of course, you've had issues with the report. But before you tell us the issues that you had with the report, what did you hear from Kenyans as you went around, as you received various submissions from Kenyans?
Kenyans had very serious concerns about their country. And as you remember, after the elections, there were quite some issues. Kenyans took to the streets. We had the Maandamano phase. And there are things that Kenyans wanted addressed. Some of those were touching on electoral justice. Many Kenyans felt that Raila Odinga won this election, but was denied victory. If you look at the map of Kenya, out of the original 8 regions, the provinces, Raila Odinga carried 6. William Ruto won in only 2. If you look at the map, there was a small yellow in Central and Rift Valley. But the entire northern Kenya, Ukambani, Coast, Nyanza, Western, it all went blue. There was a blue wave around the country. And there was a persistent feeling that the results were doctored. Of course, what we had was the thinnest presidential majority ever in our history, the thinnest. And they felt that those servers should be opened to confirm exactly what happened. And it was not an unreasonable request. You remember this happened in Gabon when we had those elections. And when the servers were opened, it was found that the guy who had been declared had actually not won. The guy who had won had 77%, the other one had 23%. But he was the guy declared. And the military took over. In Kenya, we did not want a military coup, and we are democracy. And many Kenyans said we would like to know the truth, for the truth shall set us free. So issues of electoral justice was one of the issues that took Kenyans to the streets. And of course, the rising cost of living was the other issue. And after some point, we actually agreed to sit and dialogue. Because previously we've had challenges. But through dialogue, we've been able to resolve our issues. In 2007, you remember, we eventually had a handshake between President Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga in February 2008. That calmed the country. In The last administration also, we had a handshake with Uhuru and Raila. That brought the country together, united the country. So these are some of the issues that were before us. So when we got to Bomas, there were issues that were framed for discussion, for that dialogue. And there's nothing wrong with Maandamano, people coming out to protest, this has happened everywhere. In the recent past, we saw it in France because there were issues to do with the pension laws. In Israel, the Holy Land itself, before the war broke out recently, there were serious demonstrations because of the changes in the judiciary. There was an attempt by the government to take away powers of the Supreme Court, and the Israelis came out and demonstrated. So for these issues that were very dear to the hearts of Kenyans, we wanted to sit around the table and discuss. But of the 5 issues, there were 3 issues that were already before Parliament through a memorandum that had been submitted. And one of those was the Office of Prime Cabinet Secretary, Office of the Leader of Opposition, 2/3 gender, and CDF. So these were already Kenya Kwanza issues. So when we came to Bomas, they said, these are our issues. We want this prioritized. We said from our side, electoral justice, and number 1 issue was cost of living. So we took time, listened to Kenyans, and many Kenyans said we are being overtaxed. We can't make ends meet. We want these taxes reduced. On fuel alone, you came in, the VAT on fuel was at 8%. You walk in as Kenya Kwanza and you double that to 16%. This is what sent fuel prices very high, and they still remain high today. I know that there was a reduction of 5 shillings. Before that, there was another reduction of, was it 3 or 4 shillings? So we are saying this is tokenism. But this government had the capacity to say, because of the current economic situation, we can remove that 16% VAT on fuel, take it back to 8% where Uhuru left it. That, Eric, would bring fuel prices below 200. So this tokenism they're doing is really not helpful to Kenyans. But they can make a deliberate decision to remove some of the taxes, very high taxes that they have put. We'll see relief. And that's what Kenyans wanted. This is why Kenyans went to the streets. And Eric, I can tell you, our friends, when it came to their issues, the 3 issues I've mentioned that are politically expedient to them, they were very quick to agree. But when it came to our issues, the cost of living, they stonewalled. And that is why I was one of those who disagreed with them, and I didn't sign that report. Because I felt we didn't do justice to the single most important issue, that is the cost of living. To every Kenyan. Every Kenyan is feeling it. Even as your colleague takes her kid to school today, parents are struggling. Electricity rates are going up. We were told last year you will not see electricity going up. In January, we had William Ruto say this. Immediately, it went up. The tokens are shrinking. Now, this January, again, we're being told there's another adjustment. So we are looking at a regime that is totally aloof, totally insensitive to the outcry of its citizenry. And the primary issue that took us to Bomas, which was the issue that took Kenyans to the streets, has not been addressed.
Was not addressed.
It was not addressed. And up to now, more and more taxes are being raised. So
was that your main issue of contention with the report?
At Bomas, yes. At Bomas. And we disagreed on it. But some of my colleagues felt, though they had given into some of the issues, we can take half a loaf. They say heri nusu shari kuliko shari nzima. Sometimes half a loaf is better. But for some of us, we took the stand that as long as the issues touching on the 190 of Kenya that took them to the streets have not been addressed, we will not relent.
Your co-chair for those talks, the Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, sat where you're seated a couple of weeks ago. And we asked him that question. We asked him, so a report has come out, some members have signed, some have not signed. He told us it's Eugene Wamalwa who did not sign. And this is what he told us what happened. He said, when you went for that retreat in Machakos County, you all sat in the meetings. You all agreed on the contents of the final report. And on the last day, you excused yourself because you needed to go to Rwanda to attend a meeting. And you said, I'm going to Rwanda, but you guys, once you finish, principally, I'm with you in what we've agreed. He was surprised when he heard that you've come back and you've said you disagree with that report. He says that that was disingenuous of you, that you had agreed in principle to everything up until the last minute when you said you have to leave the country. Is that true?
No, that is not correct. First of all, we had 2 retreats, actually 3. And these retreats came as a result of the hot issue of cost of living, being too hot in Bomas.
It remained contentious.
So they say, let us take a retreat. First, we went to Naivasha. At Naivasha, we disagreed. In fact, if Kimani Ichung'wah was right, was truthful, he would have said yes, or Wamalwa walked out on this issue. We adjourned it and came back to Bomas, and they said they were going to bring the CS in charge of National Treasury and the experts to now look at what taxes can be lowered. When the gentleman came, he gave us a very long lecture on economics. He's a professor, so we, but on the issues of removal of any tax, they stonewalled. So again, we had to go for another retreat. That's when we went to Machakos. In Machakos, they said they could remove 3 shillings on kerosene. We said, now you're talking. At least you've started listening to what Kenyans want. But you remember, once they doubled the VAT on fuel, prices went up. When Uhuru Kenyatta left, we were at 159 per litre on petrol. And now we are over 200. When we increased on kerosene alone, we increased by 33 shillings. Now, if you're removing only 3 shillings out of 33, that Kenyan, in the village, poor people still use kerosene. And if you are removing 3 shillings and you had added 33, it is tokenism. That, on that account again, we disagreed. And I led a walkout in Machakos. So if Kimani Ichung'wah is honest, he should say again, it's this Wamalwa. In fact, they used to call me a hardline on the issue of cost of living. We walked out. It's just that we didn't want to publicize this, that the talks were breaking down, that Kenya Kwanza had refused to lower any taxes. And eventually we went to the Hilton Hotel. And the good professor was called back again, because when there was a walkout at Stony Yard in Machakos, they pleaded and said, no, give us a last chance. We bring back our CS to see what taxes can be lowered. And by then, at the Hilton, I was leaving. I had another engagement. So I was communicating with my colleagues, and my position had been made public. I said this, if you look at the speech I made in Luanda in Vihiga County, I said, if they're not going to deal with the issue of cost of living, there will be no deal. I will not sign. I repeated this statement when we were in Mwingi, in a church where the former president attended. It was Harambe. And the people of Kambani told us, please, if they're only going to create offices and not address the issue that is touching on our lives, don't sign that report. And I pronounced myself on that.
What was your main proposal? You've mentioned
proposals.
VAT
First of all, Eric, had they even just said, okay, we need to raise revenue, so we have to provide the services. If we are to just say on VAT alone, let's take it back to 8%. When things improve, we can always, raise it back to 16. That by itself, in fact, those are some of the issues we said, okay, just 2-3 issues. That was one of our, they refused completely. And as we speak today, I saw some celebrating that, you see, the cost of living is going down now. EPRA has said 5 shillings. William Ruto himself said he has no control over EPRA and the 5 or 10 shillings.
Formula.
But he has control over which taxes. He's the one who said the Finance Act 2023 must go through. And he threatened Parliament. He said, I want to see which member of Parliament is going to say no to that finance bill. Out of the threats, the Finance Act was passed because he demanded it must be passed without any comma or anything being removed. So on that, he can do something. Let him not lie to Kenya. There's nothing I can do. This is a global crisis. This is not a global issue. This is not an Israeli or Palestine issue. The Israelis didn't create housing levy for us.
Mm.
The Israelis didn't add, this VAT to. It is Kenya Kwanza. And we're saying, Bwana, just take us back to where Uhuru was. When things improve,
you'll come back here.
Yes. And we have done this before, because the housing issue was one of the big four agendas. It was one of the pillars. But when under Uhuru Kenyatta, the court stopped the housing levy, we respected it. We backed off. What is it that is making this a matter of life and death issue? Kenyans must pay this. Anyone who is going to stop my policy, I will take them to heaven. Mambo ni matatu. We can't lead a country like that. So on that, we disagree, Eric.
Mheshimiwa, I've got to ask you, because you are a cabinet secretary in Uhuru Kenyatta's government.
Yes.
When Uhuru proposed to bring VAT on fuel, he had proposed to bring it at 16%.
Yes.
And then there was pushback from the minority side of parliament that now leveled it at 8%.
Correct.
What was the thinking that was in cabinet when you were proposing to bring the fuel VAT at 16% then? Was it to raise revenue? Was it?
Yes, it was to raise revenue, but also Uhuru, as a president, was a listening president. And when he would hear the outcry of Kenyans, he would tell his CS National Treasury, hii kitu yako wananchi wamekataa, rudisha tu. And we'll take it back to 8. The fellows, Kimani, who sat here, was the majority leader. I mean, was the budget committee chair.
Yep.
He's the guy who did that with the then CS National Treasury. Duale himself was the majority leader. We listen to Kenyans. Of course, you're allowed to create laws, ensure your policies are carried. But when the situation is so dire as it is now, you also listen to Kenyans and say, okay, we can leave this for now. When the situation, the economy improves, we'll bring it back. I mean, Kenya, the world is not ending today. You cannot create all these taxes and heap them all at once on an already overtaxed populace. You can't do that.
If you remember, even at that point, Kenyans are still crying because you're moving from 0 to 16%.
Yes.
Even when you settled at 8%, Kenyans felt, surely, it's still pain at the pump, even at 8%. Why didn't you want to go back to 0%?
Well, we listened at least and said, let's create a win-win situation. And that's why we dropped from 16 back to 8. Today, William Ruto can tell his good professor, the National Treasury, if it were 3 bob, 5 bob, Kenyans are crying too much. Let's, on this alone, had they actually just dropped that 16% alone, I would have signed that report because it will have brought the relief Kenyans were seeking. Even at 200 and something, I know there are those who are saying, things are now okay. It's not okay. If we're to remove those punitive taxes, we can go back to 160. We can have about between 20 and 30 shillings removed, not 3 bob, not 5 bob. And this is what we pushed for in Bomas. And the truth is, and I will look every Kenyan in the eye, we failed to achieve that agenda. Of course, there are those that we succeeded. We are saying, let us carry this. But we must go back to the people on the issue of cost of living and tell them we have a Zakayo in Kenya who wants more and more taxes, and he's coming for you, the farmer. He's now introducing a 5% on everything you're making as a farmer. They're going to come for you. If you have your cow, you have your goat, you have your camel, they're introducing all sorts of ridiculous taxes that are going to squeeze even the little the farmer is making. Of course, with one hand, they're saying, we've given you subsidized fertilizer. But with the other hand, they're taking away the little you're making on top. So you're left with nothing. And this is why we are saying, even Balaam, when he pushed the donkey too hard, it spoke. Kenyans are very soon going to speak, Eric. They have been pushed. The donkey punda imechoka sasa imeanguka iko chini. One day soon is going to speak.
Your coalition leader Raila has said, okay, There are many issues with this report, but let's go on ahead with it. The leader of minority in the National Assembly of Pure, and I was saying the other day, that report is going to be implemented.
Yes.
Are you still vehemently opposed to the report?
Mine was a dissenting view, but the matter is now in Parliament, and I believe a decision will be made by Parliament. There are some good things in the report. There are some things that we failed to get in. On those, we live to fight another day. And this is the approach we are taking now so that we transition this struggle to the next phase.
Okay.
We are going back to the people. Thank you.
Save for that one issue of the cost of living. What is this other good thing that's in that report?
I think on the issue of the IEBC, we didn't get everything we wanted in terms of electoral justice, but reconstitution of the IEBC panel was one good thing that was there. And I would say that probably that is one thing we succeeded. But the other issues were their issues, which we gave into.
The Prime
It was a negotiation. And they were very passionate about them, and we gave it to them.
We'll continue the conversation shortly, if you'll allow us. Let's first get into the news, and then we continue the conversation for a couple of minutes. There are very many questions as well on our social media. You can see them on
watching
YouTube,
Sound
on Facebook,
Candid
on
Talk.
X. Very many questions and comments that are coming in.
Majina yangu ni Ngika Brian. Hii ni Sound Candid Talk. Majina yangu ni Brian Ngika, na nafanya kazi ya beauty, kazi ya kunyoa, kushuka dreadlocks, kufanya massage na hata kupaka kucha, na mtaa ni mtaa wa Airways hapo Zebra Utawala. Yeah, na unatazama Sound Candid Talk.
Watch, share, like, subscribe.
Ile kitu mimi nimesema nitapigana nayo ni mambo ya ufisadi. Hiyo ufisadi haiwezi kuendelea Kenya. Mambo ya wizi, ukora, ufisadi, utapeli, hiyo lazima ikome Kenya. Ndio inarudisha sisi Kenya nyuma. Mambo matatu yanaturudisha nyuma. Jambo la kwanza ni incompetence. Jambo la pili ni mambo ya conflict of interest. Jambo la tatu ni corruption. We must deal firmly, decisively with incompetence, conflict of interest, and corruption. Wherever it is. In the judiciary, in the legislature, in the executive, we must deal with corruption. Hakuna vile Kenya itasonga mbele if we don't finish this matter of corruption. Tunaelewana ama tuelewane? So mimi naambia wale wananipigia makelele na kunifanyia maandamano, nyinyi, tell us whether there is corruption in the judiciary or not. Usifanye maandamano tu bure. We must deal, and I promise we will deal with corruption in the executive, in the judiciary, in the legislature. We will deal with it because it is holding Kenya back. And we cannot move forward as a nation until we confront the monster of corruption in Kenya. Tumeelewana jameni?
Tonight.
Hii mradi ulianza kati ya serikali ya Uhuru Kenyatta.
Kenya is the most stable democracy in Africa. Kenya is the gateway to the East African market. Kenya is the leading regional financial hub.
Na eneo hii yote Makueni mlisimama imara juzi. Manake maandamano iko kwa sheria yetu. Kama wewe umekasirika, wewe huna imani na yale serikali inafanya, una haki ya kufanya maandamano.
Mimi nimeangalia na nimeona ya kwamba hii serikali tuko nayo ni serikali ya majabasi.
Naomba niwaambie, ukisimama imara vile nimesimama straight namna hii, hakuna mwenye anaweza kupanda kwa mgongo. Unajua hivyo?
Tonight, Sound Candid Talk.
Mimi ni Willy Kibali na kutakia mwaka mpya wenye baraka na mafanikio. Happy 2024. Na hii ni Sound Candid Talk.
You are watching Sound County Talk. Watch, share, like, subscribe.